So we have reached the end of this new DC and HBO show, The Penguin. We've been talking about it each and every week. This has been an 8-episode limited series, which is sort of the latest installment in this larger Batman epic crime saga that Matt Reeves and a lot of his filmmaking team have been developing. And yeah, we've been talking about a lot of the ins and outs with this show each and every week. And so if you've not caught up to those recent reviews, I would definitely encourage you to do so. But we're here to talk about the final episode, which I know we were both highly anticipating, just considering all the major events that led up into everything that was going to go down this past week. So we're going to dive into the spoilers of the big events and the big moments that happened in this latest edition of The Penguin. But before we do that, we're just going to start off and give some brief high-level thoughts in terms of our takeaways from this final episode of this limited series. And so with that out the way, man, I'll start off with you. What did you think about this final episode of The Penguin?
I am pretty, I think, happy and satisfied with the conclusion of what we got in this episode of The Penguin. It's been it's been fun to review this show week to week, and we talk about this frequently, but it's always very difficult to just land into the seasons and land TV show endings, like all of it. It's just very hard to end TV shows. And I think as the last episode of The Penguin, this was a very entertaining and very, I think, well put together episode of television. There are a couple things in it that I would even argue has to do with the past couple episodes that are nitpicks here and there, having to deal with some big things that went down. But overall, I enjoyed myself. I thought it was really good. It was some things were predictably unpredictable, if that makes sense. And I think it was a really good episode of television. I'm pretty proud with how they landed this plane, man. Of course, the acting remained good until the end. I think there were some really cool beats to get into that we'll talk about, of course, in this episode. But yeah, I was really happy, and by the end, of course, we'll talk about it. That final shot, man, it gave me chills. I was like, oh shoot, that's what we're doing here. And so just happy to be here as a Batman fan, and happy to see where we go after this series. But I'm pretty happy with this episode, and yeah, very small nitpicks, but I'm glad we landed where we landed, I think.
I really enjoy what we saw with these final sort of 68 minutes of this series that we've gotten. I think in terms of this new experiment that we're seeing with DC, there's a couple of different fronts in which things are happening. You have what James Gunn is obviously doing, leading the charge with this new universe, but of course, like what Matt Reeves established with the Batman solo film, which now carries over into this show, is giving us just a entirely different flavor of stories that we're not seeing as much in live action, especially from DC related characters. And so the first episode that we talked about all those weeks ago, I just remember thinking at how refreshing it was. Like, oh, feels just a lot different than what we've seen. It's more mature. It's not really pulling any punches as it relates to more mature subject matter. And for the most part, this show has kept up that same type of tone and momentum all the way until the end. And once we got to this last episode, which of course, with these final episodes and in any show, especially considering that this is it's supposed to be a limited series. I mean, there's just a lot of pressure to tie up the loose ends, deliver upon the promises that they set out to deliver, and then also still simultaneously be a continuation towards the next chapter, because we do know that this does continue in some form or fashion. And I think for the most part, they were really successful at accomplishing all those different things, maintaining what the show always was, staying true, staying faithful to what they set out to do, delivering really, really incredible performances, which I think has been the hallmark of the show above anything else. And then just ultimately, I think still finding a way and managing to tie into the larger mythos of what they're trying to establish here, which is still sort of in the early stages. There's still technically a lot to see that we don't necessarily know and we don't have the answers for, but I think it makes fans curious, and it makes me curious just as an audience viewer and as an avid fan to just see where this all can go and how it could continue to build and stack upon what they've already established here. But I think between the film that we got a couple of years ago, which I absolutely love, on top of this show, I mean, it's about as good of a start as you can ask for in terms of building out, I guess, a cinematic universe for lack thereof, and this is really kind of its own corner within what they're doing over at DC. I mean, this is just an incredible 1-2 punch to watch that movie and then to watch this show in totality. and then that'll just lead us into the Batman Part 2 in a couple of years here. I think that they were really successful. Overall, the small gripes that I have with it, I've stated those numerous weeks as we've been recounting the show. Those things sort of still continue here. It's mostly just
Mm-hmm.
pacing and some messiness here and there. And overall, I think just a lack of real estate to really work with some of these stories. They just could have used
Mm-hmm.
more time. I'm just always asking for more time, but in our current landscape, that's just not really a luxury that we can enjoy. But beyond that stuff, I mean, this is almost the best case scenario that I think you can have with the show, and I really enjoyed everything that we saw. So can't wait to dive in here. But folks, if you've not seen the final episode of The Penguin, this is your spoiler warning. We're going to get into everything that went down. So go watch it and come back and finish out the rest of our conversation. So we kick off this week's episode, the final episode, with another flashback, which is similar to how we started last week, which really gave us insight into the childhood of Oz. And we saw what he did, how he was responsible for the death of his younger brothers. He did nothing to prevent their deaths, ultimately. And I think initially we were led to believe that maybe his mother didn't really know that he was ultimately responsible. And somehow this would potentially be a big reveal this week. Well, in the opening moments of this episode, that turns out to not be true. We learned that Frances, Oz's mother, has pretty much known all along that Oz is responsible for locking Jack and Benny in the sewer tunnel, didn't do anything to prevent their deaths. And she's just been holding this information in. You know, she can't really bring herself to talk about it and to address it because it's just such a horrific thing, of course. And so what she does instead is that she decides that, hey, maybe I need to kill this guy. Maybe I need to kill my son. He's that deplorable. He's that bad, and maybe I need to order a hit on my very own son, the last living son that I have, which is already an unthinkable thing to think about, of course. But
Yeah.
she decides to enlist the help of Rex, one of the family associates, also a guy that Oz kind of modeled a lot of his attributes after, somebody that he sort of
Mm-hmm.
looked up to within the family. And so she decides to enlist the help of Rex. She's going to lure Oz to Monroe's, this club that's become very important to the fabric of the show. But ultimately, while she's there and she's really just sort of soaking all of this in, and I think really thinking about what this is going to mean, and then also hearing the words from her son, like, hey, Ma, I'm going to take care of you. I'm going to do everything in my power to make sure that you're good. She just can't bring herself to do it. She just cannot order a hit on her last living son, even though she knows, like, you might be the devil. You might be the worst thing that I'm responsible for creating. But
Mm-hmm.
she decides to take a deal with the devil and allow Oz to live out his life and obviously grow into an adult man that we know. And they go on to establish this relationship and rapport with one another. But I mean, how did that feel to you, seeing that? Just seeing, something that I think that, no parent can probably ever really imagine doing something like that. But considering the circumstances, obviously, I guess we can't be all that surprised, considering that she does know that he ultimately allowed Jack and Benny to die. That would probably cross a lot of parents' minds, like,
Yeah.
oh, maybe he needs to go, right? So
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
that's ultimately what we're presented with. But what did you think about that whole opening sequence?
Yeah, it's some of the, you know, darkest, I think, relationships between a mother and son I've ever seen, for sure. But that devil, or that idea of Oz being the devil is like the most interesting part as well. Of like, you're kind of right. Like, this kid is really twisted. You know what he did? He killed your other two kids. But from Francis's point of view, I think, watching the show in totality, it's been very hard to me to place how I feel about Francis as a character. Like, I still can't, even right now, the show being over, I'm like, I don't know how to feel about this woman, because on one hand, she technically, she didn't kill her kids. And on another hand, she also did decide, one, not to go through with, I guess, getting rid of Oz in a very particular way, and deciding to, as they said, kind of make a deal with the devil. And it's a really hard thing, I think, to grasp it. Like you said, as a parent, it's like, yes, I have one son who got rid of my other sons, but does that make me fit to kill that son? I don't know. There's just so many crazy questions that you have to ask in her point of view and in her shoes, and I cannot put myself in her shoes. It's like an impossible thing for me to do. And so in some ways, I think there are a couple ways I do empathize with her, and there are other ways you're like, no, you made a deal with the devil, now you have to dance with him. It's what she literally did. And so that whole scene is I think is a really cool establishing part of this episode, to being like, y'all, let's do Oz. We know, like, again, he's technically never been super sympathetic, But his mom, in our point of view, has always been his one weak spot. And the opening of this episode is like, nah, even his mom really didn't really have that spot for real. So still don't feel that bad for Oz. I think it's a very interesting way to establish the episode. I thought it was very well needed, but also like, damn, what are you supposed to do in that situation?
It's truly, I mean, it's really eye-opening stuff when you just like take a step back and think about like, hold on, wait. So she's really having these thoughts and these feelings, which are in probably the most twisted way I can put it, they are understandable. The idea that you maybe want to kill your last living son, knowing that he was responsible for the death of your other two boys who you also love so much. To have that thought cross your mind is not the crazy. I mean, it's crazy, but it's not the craziest thing.
Mm-hmm.
She's grieving. You know, that's a real emotion. I mean, people go through all sorts of crazy fucked up scenarios in their head, but then to actually follow through with it is another conversation entirely. And she got close. She got really close, but ultimately couldn't bring herself to do it. And I think, you know, now that we see what Oz has become and we see the relationship that developed between those two, now she's become culpable. And now she's somewhat responsible for making the monster that Oz has become. And I do think that we do have to place some responsibility on her in that respect, because she was very aware and in tune of his criminal activity. Like, she wasn't trying to lead him down a path of, hey, go to college and get an education and become an engineer. She wasn't doing any of that type of talk. And she ultimately reaped the benefits from the work that he put in and from the lifestyle that he provided her. And so she absolutely was very much an accomplice to all of this. And so she's certainly not innocent by any stretch of the imagination, but there is a small part of you where it's like, I mean, she's still his mother. So like, I mean, damn, like, what do you do? They were already sort of wrapped up in that lifestyle anyway, even at his young age. And he's now the only child that she has. She has no man or not. Like, all of that stuff just becomes like really, really complicated when I think you just like take a step back and you can sort of make an argument on either side of it. But ultimately, you just have to sort of examine the situation and say, like, Jesus Christ, this has gone so far beyond repair, you know, than I think that could ever truly, you know, be dealt with in a reasonable way. Like, it's gotten so dark and so tragic for both of them. And we do ultimately sort of find out that Francis does regret not following through with the hit. You know, the next huge scene that we see is Francis and Oz. They're tied up in Monroe's. You know, Sophia has kidnapped both of them at this point, and Sophia is here trying to make a point. You know, she has them both tied up, and she wants Oz to admit the truth, because Sophia now also knows this information. Like, hey, you killed your brothers, essentially. Tell your mother what you did. Like, admit it, or I'm going to chop her pinky off. She's going to be 9 fingers, you know, after this whole situation. And so it's a very high tense situation. And we see that essentially Oz is willing to let his mother lose her pinky. He was not going to admit the truth in that situation. He screamed, he pleaded, he cursed, he begged, he did everything but actually say the words that Sophia requested of him. And so as Francis's pinky is nearly about to come off, she's finally like, you know what, fuck this. Like, this is my finger. I know what you did. You're not fooling me. And then she goes on a long sort of, you know, monologue about the regret that she has. And she says to him, you're a disappointment. You're a waste of space. I wake up every goddamn day sick that I'm your mother. And then proceeds to break a beer bottle and stab him in the stomach, essentially trying to kill him. It's so much happening. It's so much going down. It's a crazy emotional performance from Colin Farrell and Deirdre O'Connell here. They're doing incredible work. But what was your reaction to seeing this huge fight between these two? Because it all just comes out. It all breaks down. It's all sort of been building to this big moment where I think we just kind of see Frances have one last huge great acting moment before she ultimately has her stroke in a few short seconds after that.
It's so interesting to me because, you know, the whole thing about this is Sophia literally told Julian, she was like, I want Oz to hurt as much as I hurt. And it turns out the way to do that is like this big weird therapy session she's kind of forcing them to go through. And so it's so interesting how I think she exhibits her force differently than a lot of other people would. I think, you know, most people, Oz probably would have been dead by this point. Francis probably would have been dead by this point. But Sophia's like, no, y'all gonna get these mind games and I'm gonna do it to you right here. But in this moment, man, it's like, as a viewer, I love how they, I think, shaped and sculpted this whole thing. Because as a viewer, We know exactly what Oz did. Everybody in the room knows what Oz did. We're all just like, dude, just tell the truth. Everybody's like, dude, just tell the truth, and he still won't do it. And it's almost in this moment, also because like another one of those next levels up of like, you're a deplorable human being. Like you really won't say anything to get your mom's pinky not get cut up. And I'm trying to figure out why he won't confess to that. Maybe he doesn't want to hurt his mom's feelings. Does he not think his mom doesn't know? Like, it's like, dude, just kind of confess in this moment. He won't. And he's such a broken character that everything he does still is so selfish all the time. So if he even says it in that moment, like, wow, you really don't care about anybody but yourself. Like you was really going to let your mom get her pinky cut off. So like you said, a lot of good acting work and performances are going on in that moment. But I'm still trying to understand the psyche of why he wouldn't go through with it, with just telling everybody what he did.
Yeah, it's hard to. I don't even know if we can try to explain it because it is like a situation where you just have to question, like, dude, come on, the gig is up. Everybody knows. Just like say the words. But there's also a part of me that believes, even though he did it and he didn't prevent it, and I think a large part of him wanted to follow through and see his brothers ultimately, meet their demise.
Mm-hmm.
I think a part of him still can't wrap his head around and accept the fact that like he is responsible, like that is like his doing, because even in the moment when he locks them into the sewers, it almost felt like he was doing it out of a sense of like retribution, as if he was wronged, as if he was getting back at them, and ultimately to allow his relationship with his mother to really flourish in isolation away from his brothers, because he wanted her attention. He wanted essentially her all to himself. And
Mm-hmm.
and I think that he feels like he was kind of doing something in the moment that morally felt right to him. But in the years since then, as he's become an adult, and he's probably reflected on this a lot, and we've seen him reflect on it at earlier moments of the show, I think he's almost in this weird state of disbelief or delusion about their demise and what he did, and not really owning that responsibility of it. I don't even know if he can like bring himself to admit the truth of what it is, because in his mind it might not even exist that way anymore. He's probably developed a new narrative, for what it is. We've seen him lie about how they met their ends earlier in the season. And
Mm-hmm.
so I don't even think that he's fully confronted it himself to be able to utter those words like, yes, I did that. I don't even know if he's worked it up in his head that he even like truly believes that. It's a weird psychological thing, but that's
Yeah.
that deniability of it all that I think he's kind of living with. That's the best that I can come up with really in that moment. But
Mm-hmm.
it is one of those things where it's just like, yeah, he's pretty scummy for allowing her to go through that level of pain, even though he has the very information that could completely relieve her and probably, maybe, possibly prevent, what happened next. She has a stroke. This is kind of like almost a fatal blow for her. She already has the Lewy body dementia. She already is, on the older side of things. So a stroke, that's kind of like the last big thing that's going to happen to her before she ultimately does kick the bucket at some point in the future. We see that she
Right.
does technically survive here, but
Mm-hmm.
it's really her last moment being a comprehensible, very
Right.
in control of her body, sort of human. And then after that, Oz escapes. There's a lot of chaos, a lot of commotion, and we see him actually go to City Hall. And I thought that this scene was interesting because he spoke to Councilman Haiti at City Hall. And this is where they
Mm-hmm.
sort of tie in the stuff with the Batman. And we see Bella Real come back,
Mm-hmm.
who's now become mayor. And I find this scene interesting because, obviously it sets up what happens later. He pretty much frames like everything on Sophia that
Right.
leads to her arrest and her return to Arkham. But there's that moment when he goes into the courtroom and he sits
Mm-hmm.
on the high table where a judge would sit in the courtroom. And we were talking last week about like how Oz is becoming, the king of Gotham. He's becoming a mob boss. But another very, very strong attribute of the character of Oswald Cobblepot historically has been a political figure.
Yeah.
Somebody
Exactly.
who works within the political system of Gotham,
Mm-hmm.
who's run for mayor, who's won and become mayor in several different iterations. And I thought that was a really, really clever way to work that in. And it wasn't something that I was expecting or even really checking for, because we've been so focused on the criminal activity, even
Right.
thinking about like political aspirations. It's like, oh, that they're probably way far off from that. But even though
Mm-hmm.
they might not be moving towards that in the immediate future, I thought it was a nice nod to at least like point to the fact that, like, yes, Oswald Cobblepot is actually somebody of of high political acumen in several different sort of iterations of Batman stories and Gotham stories.
Yeah, I enjoyed that part of the episode. We'll get to his look that he comes into later by the end of the episode. But there was I was talking about like where I need something in the eyes that we know. You know what I'm saying? Like the eyes, copper pie again. Usually got a monocle on. Like you said though, he's been the one we know has been involved in politics and does have these random pulls in these different places within the political realm. And I was like, they're actually doing it. And I agree with you. I didn't think they were going to do it, or at least even give us a glimpse this early. But I was very surprised and very happy actually with the way in which they did it. Even throwing Bella Real in there real quick, with her arm still messed up from the shooting. I was like, yeah, this is really cool. This is how, one, you tie it in. Two, this is how you give us, I think, pieces of the Oz Cobb. It's taking me everything not to say copper pot. The Oz Cobb that we know. And so, yeah, I really like that. And I thought it was a really good detail for them to throw in.
Yeah, and I mean, this could mean it could mean significant things, for future Batman films that they decide to do, obviously with Matt Reeves, to just sow those, early seeds. Like, okay, he has relationships, and we know what relationships can ultimately lead to. They could lead to powerful political positions, especially if there are things that happen that, I guess, for lack of a better term, allow or make the city feel like that they need a new leader, or feel like that they want to revolt against what's currently happening. They feel like that they're not being serviced, or they feel like they're being ignored. Like all sorts of stuff you can do that can lead to that
Man of
path
the
for
people.
him. Man of the people, which is that's exactly what this episode is sort of entitled, or one of the things that they sort of point out in this episode. But I think also too. In future Batman movies, like I think we'll obviously see Colin Farrell back. I don't know if he'll ever be like the main villain in any of these movies. Like he always can just kind of be a background character,
Right.
moving and getting things together and building while we see Batman deal with another formidable foe. And then some point down the line, it's like, oh yeah, out of nowhere, Oz might be the big bad at some point. He might be like the ultimate true villain.
I feel like I seen something, heard something that, of course, he's going to be in the next movie, whatever. I think he said like Colin Farrell said 5-6 scenes in the next film. I feel like I seen something in that same quote that was like, oh, and maybe Batman 3, he might have the more heightened role as potentially one of the main villains. So I think you're onto something there.
Yeah, that could be a good path for them. Something that's a little bit different than I think what we've seen before and goes against the grain. But yeah, it'll be interesting to see how that takes shape. But on the other side of things, Sophia, she's dealing with a lot, obviously. And after Oz escapes, she starts to do some things, make some deals. She basically, she goes to her gang. She's like, hey, if anybody wants Gotham, it's yours. Like, y'all can have it. I'm gonna be out of here. she just like throws it all out on the table. One of the lieutenants is like, that's not, there's no way you're gonna just like let this all go. And she's like, yeah, no, actually that is the case. I can do this. Like, it's fine. We see her burn down her mansion, her father's mansion, essentially burn all their belongings, really just symbolic of just shedding all of this former life, that she sort of has, all of this association that she has with the Falcone name, the Falcone identity. She just gets rid of it all. And, we think that she's able to capture Oz. Oz is ultimately taken over by the men of Zal, but we know that Oz has like done some backhanded stuff. Him and Vic, they've made some plays, and ultimately it's a big inside job. And Oz is able to get Sophia essentially and sort of trap her. And we see in the next scene, he takes her to the docks, which have been, sort of symbolic of the show. Water has been very symbolic of the show. And it looks like Sophia might meet her end. Oz is holding her at gunpoint. And he doesn't do that. In actuality, he allows the police to come in, Gotham PD come in and arrest her, and they're going to return her to Arkham. So this, ties up the loose thread of what he did earlier with Councilman Haiti. He basically pins the whole explosion on her. He says that the whole bunker, the whole base of operations belonged to the Maroni. This was just the same old shit. Falcone, Maroni's, like nothing to see here. This will be a big win for Gotham PD if you can capture her and finally put her away. And I dare say that this fate for Sophia is likely worse than the fate of death. Going back to this place that was so harmful for her, so terrible to her, but kind of made her who she is now in a lot of respects. she's now going to return to Arkham for the foreseeable future. But they didn't kill her, which I didn't think that they would do, but they actually did
Mm-hmm,
something pretty
mm-hmm.
creative and just locked her back up in a padded cell. So what were your thoughts on just that fate for Sophia? Because they could have gone, I think, a couple of different directions, and maybe a lot of people likely thought that it would be, probably a situation of do or die. Like somebody might have to go. It will
Mm-hmm.
probably have to be her if they're going to make this really about Oz. But again, they find a way to keep her around and do something that is going to really sort of, I think, just like really break her down and take her back to a dark place and a dark time that she had all those years ago.
Yeah, I think I was with you. I think I was never under the impression that they would kill her. I was always under the impression that she would lose, though. You know what I mean? I was like, she's gonna lose, but I don't think she's going to die. And the comic book way of doing things was to just put her back in Arkham Asylum, right? Like that's how Arkham works in comic books, and that's what that place is for. Is to keep kind of Batman Rogues Gallery around in some ways without having to kill him. Again, this is supposed to be a little more realistic, but I was like, no, you need to keep her around. I think nobody would be upset at Kristen Milioti still being around. Sophia is one of the best parts of this show. I was like, you can't let this woman go, and what a fitting, I think, ending. Then, like you said, something worse than death for Sophia is putting her right back in this jail cell. Which is it's so interesting to me because originally when she's there, she gets framed for something she didn't do. This time she's there for something she definitely pretty much did. You know what I'm saying? I'm like, yeah, you kind of did do all those crimes. Unfortunately, the Penguin takes a lot of the heat off of himself. He did a lot of
Mhm.
it too. But it is interesting this time. It's like, no, you are kind of guilty of a lot of these things. And I think she played with the fire that is whatever this business, whatever is, with the mafia and the drugs and all of this mob stuff that she's been doing. She is kind of guilty of all these things now. So not only that, but now she's back under the care of Julian Rush, who I know she's like, oh my God, I'm being overseen by one, this dude is ridiculous, but also I'm being overseen by another man. And that's kind of been her whole thing is like, I don't want to be under control by men ever again. That's part of the reason I think she wants to leave Gotham. She's like, y'all can have this. I'm not doing this no more. Get me out of here. I just want to be free. And now she is back in somewhere where the opposite is again true. And so again, very fitting I think conclusion for her in this series. But I think we'll see her again, of course, by the hint we get with the letter from Selena Kyle. I actually love that they did that. But yeah, I'm glad that they kept her around.
And the explanation here in terms of the betrayal, so to say, on the side of Sophia, they sort of use it in a montage style where we see a lot of the underlings were essentially tired of being underestimated, being overlooked. Very similar to what we heard Oz express earlier in the season. Just that thought of being underappreciated, and these higher ups, the wealthier folks of Gotham, the people that are reaping the benefits of all the work that we do, they don't even know our names. And we see a really quick montage of a lot of those lieutenants sort of killing their superiors. I thought that stuff happened too quickly. I think that
Yeah.
that could have used a lot more time, just because we don't really know any of these people. And that's like a very typical scene in any sort of like mafia mob boss story, where you just see body after body after body drop within an organization, just like signaling like it's all over, like everything is over,
Hmm.
like this is the end. The chickens have come home to roost, for lack of a better term. But it just went by so quickly. And I know that they sort of just had to get to the point of just like, hey, we're putting Sophia back here in this place. Ultimately Oz he's gonna do something that he knows is more a twisting of the knife than the fatal kill blow towards her, just because he wants her to
Yeah.
suffer. He wants her to go through that. Death would just be too quick and too easy for them. The Selena Kyle note we see come in, obviously pointing to the fact we know Zoe Kravitz plays the character in the movies. Team up there? Are they going to work together? What was the letter? What did it say? It definitely clearly looks like Sophie is pleased at what's being said. They are technically half
Yeah.
sisters. What do you
Hmm.
think might ultimately come from that exchange of words between those two?
Yeah, something for sure. I think they both definitely know the travesties that their fathers have committed. In fact, their father killed both of their moms. You know what I'm saying? Like that is dark within itself. But I think again in this moment where Sophia is again being made to one be in Arkham, two be under the care of another man, she's like, wait, I have a sister out there, and I think it gives her a little bit of hope of like, a woman that's actually on her side. She hasn't really had that. It's only been men kind of in her path and in her way. But now she's again got a letter from this person like, whoa, wait, maybe I do still have somebody in my corner that is blood. And so I don't know what the letter says. I think they will team up at some point. Maybe she helps her get out of jail somehow. I don't know. Selena Kyle, she's slippery. She can do things. Who knows what happens? But I'm looking forward to a team up. I think I would love to see that happen. As of course the most obvious path, but I'm like, sometimes I'm like, heck yeah, give me the team up. And I think it'd be pretty cool. I think to see them on screen together.
Yeah, I think there's a lot of really juicy stuff they can do there, especially if we're going to see Kristen Milioti possibly make her
Mm-hmm.
way into the cinematic version of this universe. That's obviously a very natural thing that they could have included here, and we could see a big breakout scene, where Selena Kyle pops up and busts her out of Arkham, and they start
Mm-hmm.
to do crime together, something of that sort. And it'll be interesting too, just because if that's the case, then again, I'm wondering like where Penguin comes into all of this, because
Mm-hmm.
will Sophia set aside her vengeance, her bloodlust for Oz temporarily
Mm-hmm.
due to potentially something else that might be happening? I don't know. Like, we have no idea what the Batman Part 2 is going to be. So there's a lot that they can do there. Obviously, though, these two, like Kristen Milioti and Zoe Kravitz, feel like that would just be a great partnership,
Fire.
a great on
Yeah.
team pairing between those two. So I would be here for it. Shortly thereafter, Oz is on top of the world. He celebrates. He goes to the hospital where his mother is with Vic. And then he finds out that his mother essentially is in sort of a catatonic state. She suffered this really, really terrible stroke. She's in a vegetative state, essentially. She can't respond. She pretty much can't move. Like, she's I mean, she's on the brink of death. Like, that's really where she's at this point. And there's nothing that they can do just because of all the medical conditions that she has. And Oz is just like completely broken down. This is a big moment where he just kind of realizes that the mother that he had, the mother that he knew, is pretty much gone forever. And then after that, him and Vic, after Vic sort of consoles him, they go out on a park bench, middle of the night. They're talking, and then Oz strangles Vic to death. He kills him in cold blood, and he does it because he can't allow this vulnerability to be a weakness to him. He says to Vic, that's the thing about family. It's a strength. It drives you, but fuck it if it don't make you weak too. And that's his rationale for killing Vic. And he strangles him with his bare hands. This person that's been side by side with him the entire time. He's been this underling, his running buddy. He's come into his own. And he saw Oz really sort of at his lowest and darkest moments, especially right before this, when he realizes that his mother is pretty much gone for all intents and purposes. And so it's a pretty shocking scene and shocking turn of events for Vic. I don't know
Mm-hmm.
if there was any other reasonable conclusion for his character, though, just because, one of the big things
Yep.
we talked about was those tethers that Oz has to people that he cares about. And the only people that he had were his mother and Vic. Those were kind of the two people that he felt an emotional connection to. Now both of them are gone. They're off the table. The
Mm.
the, the transformation essentially for him to become a supervillain, it's complete, and
Yep.
it's at his own hands because he decided to go ahead and get rid of Vic.
Wow, where do I even start? Tony and Christopher, man. No, it was definitely, I think even you said it, there's almost no other way for the story to conclude than Vic dying in some way. And I think, we speculated over the weeks, like, is Sophia going to do it? He's going to die in, I don't know, a shootout, like something. I always knew that he was going to perish, I think, in some way, because that's Gotham and that's how dark, this universe is. And I knew that this character in Vic was in some ways too good for what this world had to offer, and I knew it had to end in a tragedy. Everything about this show is tragic and a tragedy, and Vic was of no exception, especially being close to somebody like the Penguin. And Oz, up until this point, everybody that he sees as family has to go. It's a crutch for him, and unfortunately that meant the betrayal and killing of Vic as well. And so although I knew it was coming, it didn't hurt any less. I was like, dang, man, like, dang, Vic, like, it's so sad to see you go in this way, because he was malleable in a lot of ways. Like, Vic was his right hand man. Vic learned so much. Vic got Link to even set his whole thing up. Vic was we seen Vic come from the bottom and now to be legit like Oz's right hand man. He was killing people, he's organizing, he's doing all of these things, and only for it to come back to kind of bite him in the butt in a lot of ways and see Oz kill him was it's just a very sad way, I think, to go out. And a very, very dark scene too. But again, it's so crazy that like we seen it coming, or I seen it coming. You know what I'm saying? I was like, oh no, this is not good. Nobody's around. I was like, this is probably it for him, and it definitely was. So yeah, man, rest in peace to Vic. What's also crazy is I had two minds in that moment. I was like envisioning, like, man, where if Vic lives, where would he be in like the Batman 2? Like, oh man, where's he gonna be in maybe the Batman 3? And he's not going to be there at all. It's so unfortunate, man. But yeah, I think it was very fitting for his character and for what Gotham is supposed to be as a character in itself.
Yeah, I think the surprising thing is not the ultimate fate of Vic, because once he chose the life, quote unquote, earlier in the season when he had the sort of fork in the road moment with his ex and choosing to stick with Oz, it was pretty much at that moment I knew like, okay, his fate is sealed.
Yeah.
It's the fact that Oz decided to do it himself. Like, I am going to kill you with my own two hands. I'm not going to arrange for it. I'm not going to get a hitman to do it and take you down some dark alleyway. I thought that might have been the way that they went. Like, he just orchestrates some fake made up bullshit and Vic gets in the car and he gets the back of his brains blown out. Where, no, actually, Oz, in a very, very vulnerable state, is like, this is what I'm going to do. Like, after probably having the lowest moment, which was preceded by likely the highest moment in which he finally overcame Sophia. Like, so much is happening in a very, very quick time. And it's just like, yo, you're all over the place. I mean, I don't even know like what to deem it as, to go from these emotional extremes, you know, and now to be in this place where it's like, you know what, he has to go. You know, I see now clearly in this moment that he's actually not good for me, because this idea of family, it's not going to work. You know, I see what it's done to me already because of how I'm feeling regarding my mother. So you ultimately have to go. And maybe he got this huge moment of clarity because of his mother being in this vegetative state, maybe because of what happened earlier in the episode with, you know, her stabbing him. You know, maybe he now realizes like, oh yeah, this all is just like bullshit to me. Like I can't deal with any of this stuff. But he also went back to his mother. He was still willing to like move past that. Like he walked in celebrating, happy, like, hey ma, look what I did. He literally picked her up, like, let's go. Like,
after getting stabbed.
Didn't think nothing of it. It's like, my guy, she stabs you with a broken beer bottle. Like, that's a crazy thing to just like brush off. But man, it's so tragic for Vic, man. It's a really, really good character, you know, that they established here. Could have had a little bit more to do in several episodes, but for the most part, they did a really good job. And Rennie Feliz, man, he definitely made his mark, I think, on the show with this character for sure. So I can't wait to see him in additional things down the line. And then essentially that brings us to the end of the episode. Oz is again sort of ascended now to the criminal hierarchy of Gotham. He's at the top. You know, we see him in this big, lush new penthouse. He's taken his mom out of the hospital. He sat her up in this room in isolation where she can look out over Gotham, can't do anything. That's probably the worst case scenario for her, right? Because she doesn't really love Oz at this point anymore. I think that's pretty clear. Like she said, like, I should have killed you. I should have did it. And so she's regretful, and now she can't do anything. She's immobile and has to just like deal with this. Oz is living in this twisted reality. Like, look, I gave you what I said I always would give you, a penthouse in the sky. Like, here, I delivered this for you. And then we also see Eve, who's, you know, returned to Oz, dressed up exactly as his mother. She wears like the same gown, has the same hairstyle. They do the dance. She's essentially role playing as his mother, you know, telling him all these things like, I'm proud of you. I'm happy for you. I can't wait to see what you do next. Just like really, really crazy, twisted stuff. And then the final shot, of course, is Eve telling Oz, like, yeah, now nothing can stand in your way. Up, but not quite. That bat signal comes into the sky. So it's a crazy, you know, final few moments. And we do sort of see Oz come into his own. What were your thoughts on just like the final wrap up there as we start to, you know, conclude this chapter and then enter into the next phase of what Oswald Cobblepot is going to do in the future?
I just want to say I love the ending. Like these last 5 minutes when Oz gets out of the car, goes up the building. I was like, one, it's super comic booky, but in all the Batman ways that I was like, yeah, this is what's up. This is a good way to end the show. And man, like you said, his mom is a vegetable. You know, I'm gonna say it again. When you make a deal with the devil, this is what happens. You know what I'm saying? Like it comes back to kind of bite you in the butt, and now you're a vegetable, kind of looking over Gotham. That's it. Oz, out of all of this, just wants like approval and like this love for his mom. And at this moment, we know, like you said, we've heard from his mom. His mom wishes he was dead. He's just stabbed him. He doesn't love him. So what does he do? He gets Eve, who is our Clayface, right? He gets Eve, who can dress up and do all these things to cosplay his mom pretty much almost perfectly and tell him the things that his mom probably wouldn't tell him in this moment. I love you. I'm proud of you. You did it. All of this is because of you. Thank you. All of those things. And it is the creepiest, darkest thing that you could possibly see. Again, I feel like in any normal gangster movie, this would be like a regular celebratory thing. Like it's just me and my girl. Like we won. We're dancing in this big old penthouse. Let's get it. But because this is Gotham, because this is the Penguin, it ends up being this really sick and twisted ending to a short story that's it's both compelling, but it leaves us in a place to be like, dang, now what is Penguin going to do with the rest of Gotham? And when that bat signal turns on, man, I actually got chills because it was the way it was framed. It was the way, like you said, Eve had just said, nothing can stand in your way now, and then it just kind of pops up. I thought that was very well timed and very well done. Especially it gets people excited because that is what's next, right? Like the Batman is the next thing to come about in this universe. So it's like, oh shoot, Batman needs to be on the way. We even talked about him dealing with explosion and stuff. Like, when is he going to pop up? What's going to happen? And now we at least got a glimpse of like, yeah, he's on the way. And so yeah, I really like this ending, man. I thought it was, again, very comic booky, but also very fitting for the character and what the show had to offer.
He also sported the full tuxedo. He had the tail.
Yeah,
He had the top hat. I said the top hat was going to come out.
he looked the part.
He didn't put it on, but he definitely had it on him. So it's like the top hat is present. But yeah, he looked like the Penguin. He looked like how we envisioned him to look. And for them to end it in this way, him seemingly having it all, him seemingly having everything, while at the same time you just look on the sort of inner turmoil that he's dealt with, and then all of these, what all these other characters have dealt with. It's like, wow, we have sacrificed a lot for him to get to this place. Like when you really just look at everything that occurred in the show, how many bodies dropped, how many people died. I mean, we're talking like dozens and dozens and dozens of people died in this big war that's been taking place that's allowed him to ascend the throne, essentially, to overtake Gotham's criminal underworld. So it definitely was not without its heavy losses and its casualties, which does bring me to the bat signal. It's a great scene. It's a great shot. It's a great moment. Is it enough, though? Like, we talked last week a lot about the explosion.
Mm-hmm.
Damn it, Bruce, where are you at? Like, this is a big, massive incident in Gotham. Yeah. And then you compound it with the fact that, like, there's a massive criminal war happening between like two of the biggest families in Gotham, and you're nowhere to be found. Yeah. And we don't see him. And they said that he wasn't going to be in the show. So at no point did I expect to see him. But again, you're telling a story set within the city in which there is this heroic figure that pops up in the middle of the night to stop Gotham's criminal underworld and to be, sort of a force for good.
Yeah.
And at no point we see him. Out of all we're talking mansions are burning down, street blocks are blowing up, drugs are being distributed citywide, like the mayor has gotten involved. Like, pretty much all of the institutions that have a part in this, they're there, except Batman. And so I don't know. The bat signal, it's nice, it's great, but is it enough?
We're gonna have to see. Again, they're gonna have to come up with some explanations somewhere, somehow, because there's a lot of questions I think that need to be answered of where this dude has been. Part of me wishes there was somebody that could hold him accountable, that at the beginning could be like, bro, where have you been? You know what I'm saying? Like, dude, what's going on? And maybe that's Gordon. Maybe Gordon's pissed at him. Maybe something bad is happening. That's why Gordon was like, bro, where the hell have you been? I got to call the bat signal to get you to see that the street just blew up. Like, what's going on here? So I don't know, man. But yeah, I don't know if it's enough. I think I agree. I don't know if it's enough.
I don't think it's enough. It's not. It's technically not enough. It really strains believability in this
Mm-hmm.
universe. And this was a thing that I typically sort of left behind with a lot of other stories that we see, like Avengers and all of that. Like there were always those conversations. Like once the MCU started to really expand, it was like, well, why didn't Cap pop up or why didn't Tony pop up? And it's like, well, if you really think about it, most of them are kind of spread out across the country. You know,
Right.
you're not going to see Cap and DC just like make a quick road trip to New York or some shit's going down. Like it's probably not
Yeah.
going to go down that way. And it's likely being handled much quicker than he could really actively address it if he's not already dealing with
Mm-hmm.
some shit on his own. But Batman's right there. Like
He lived there
he's there. He's down the street. Like,
in
you
his
know,
own penthouse.
he's in a penthouse in a tower. He can see everything. Like he knows what the fuck is going down in Gotham. And so it's just like when you live in that type of universe and he doesn't do anything and there's a lot of shit happening, it's just like, I don't know. But that's the world that we have to live with and sort of deal with. And you know, maybe they'll address it. In all likelihood, they probably won't. They'll just move past it and just keep it
Mm-hmm.
going, and we'll just forget about it. But we'll ultimately see. But as we wrap up here, I want to ask: now that we have all 8 episodes, now that this whole
Yeah.
thing is coming on, I mean, where does this fall for you in terms of live action comic book adaptation television series? Like
Mm.
we've gotten a lot over the years. You know, we often talk about movies and
Mm-hmm.
the best superhero comic book live action movies, but when you talk about live action TV shows, you know, considering that this is a bit different for DC, you know, they obviously had the long run on the CW, you know, that whole universe, but there have been another number of other shows. You know, we praised Daredevil a lot on the show and The Boys, all these different things. But
Yeah.
where would this season of television fall for you in terms of the great, I guess, the great comic book live action TV shows that we've gotten over the years?
You know, it's a good question. And I'd have to like evaluate in totality, and even in that, I can't forget the greatness that was The Walking Dead. You know what I'm saying? Another very good live action comic book television show. But I I think off the top of my head, I can easily put it in like a top 10. You know what I'm saying? Because we've had a lot of goodness, like you said, The Boys. I'm never gonna get the limited series that is Watchmen, that banger right there. Like we've been through a lot of good kind of live action shows nowadays. And so
So let's do
I
this.
def
Is it better? Is it better than Daredevil season 1?
ooh.
Is it
Oh
better than
boy.
Daredevil season 1? Let's go there. Let's start there.
Ooh, I don't. Ooh, that's a hard one, dude. You know, I'm gonna say no. Actually, I think Daredevil season 1 was just it was like that. It was Daredevil also had the advantage of being so jarringly good, if that makes sense. We were like,
Yeah, we didn't see
whoa,
that coming at all.
is that what this could be? Like we were like, oh yeah, you know, and the Penguin does have something else where like we did see the Batman. We seen how dark the Batman could be. We seen, I think, even the potential for what this show could be. Did it exceed my expectations? I think so. I think the Penguin did exceed my expectations a little bit, but woo, Daredevil was doing something different at the time, that I just don't think you can necessarily compare or compete against. So yeah,
Do,
yeah.
do you
Go ahead.
think season 1 of Daredevil is the best or
I like season 2. I'm a
2?
season 2 guy. I think.
So not better than season 2. If it's not better than season 1, then it can be better than season 2 in that
Yeah, not
case.
better than season 2.
Better than any season of The Boys that we've gotten. 1, 2, 3. Let's
This
remove
past
4.
season,
Yeah, it's better. I think it's better than
it's
this
better
past
than
season
this
for sure.
past season.
Um,
I think so. I think it might be better than maybe the first season. It might be
okay.
better than the first season of The
Okay.
Boys.
Yeah, I probably can give you
Mhm.
that too. Yeah, because the boys got better as it went along for sure.
Yeah, season 2 was like a banger. It was
Yeah,
like, oh shoot,
2 and then 3. Yeah, different
Yeah.
level. Watchmen, better than Watchmen.
Watchmen is so good. Don't do that to me.
Yeah, Watchmen
I-
may be the best. It's
Watchmen
hard.
is so good, bro.
Yeah.
That's like Watchmen might be like top 3. Like,
Yeah.
like it's like that. Like Watchmen is really good.
Yeah.
I don't think it's better than Watchmen. I don't.
Okay, but it's hovering.
It's up
in
there, though.
It's up there.
It's up there though. It's really good. They did a fantastic job with this TV show. It's definitely up there. I think in the upper echelon of what comic book live action TV could be. Absolutely.
Yeah, I agree. I definitely think like we're talking top 5, top 6 conversation when
Yeah.
you just take a look at some of those other shows like better than maybe a season of Daredevil, maybe,
Hmm.
maybe season or two of The Boys, Watchmen. It's kind of tough, but the most direct correlation I do feel is like kind of Daredevil, even though like
Yeah,
Daredevil is
because it's
about a hero,
street-ish.
but the street
Yeah.
level ish stuff
Hmm.
feels very akin to what they did here. So that felt like the easiest comp. And but really all three seasons of Daredevil are incredible. Like
Bangers.
all three of them are
They
great.
went
Even
crazy.
I mean, it's really hard, to pit them against each other. But I think with due time, we'll be able to more clearly assess it. But last big thing, just want to address is kind of the future of this Batman epic crime saga. I think that's like now the new official term that they're running with. That Matt Reeves is sort of spearheading, but it's now starting to spin off in these other different areas. Obviously, with this show, there's talks and potentially rumors of maybe other spin-off shows. I know
Mm.
there was a big rumor that came out that there was going to be some sort of like maybe Joker limited series with Barry Keoghan. James Gunn debunked that rumor and said that they haven't
Hmm.
even discussed something like that. Doesn't mean it's not possible, but at least as
Right.
of right now, they haven't fully explored that idea. But who's to say that there couldn't be other characters, other things
Hmm.
within this world? What do you overall think is kind of the future of what they're doing here? Obviously, we have the main movies, but do you see other opportunities for maybe other characters, maybe some other villains to get spin-off series, some limited runs, a second season of the Penguin? The
Hmm.
sky's kind of the limit, but what do you sort of foresee for the future of this specific sort of corner of the franchise?
I think so, and I think the thing I don't want to happen is I don't want them to CW this thing. You know what I'm saying? Just start throwing characters at the wall and be like, we got to make a show, we got to make a show, we got to make a show. But the way I think Matt Reeves and the whole team is kind of handling these characters, I think it's so different when you Batman just has the best rose gallery, but it just it's so different here because I think they're able to take all these characters and give them even more depth, add to their stories, adapt them to this specific Gotham that they've made that is so grounded and so different than everything. I could not have imagined that Eve Carlo would be our Clayface in this show, and she is a sex worker who just dresses as different. You know what I'm saying? Like that is a very specific thing that's akin to this universe that I appreciate so much, and that they can do that treatment with people like that with the Penguin and in other really cool characters that we know and love in that Batman Rose Gallery, even just characters in general. It don't even got to be villains. I think either. I think I'm okay with that as long as they have that same attention to detail that they did in this show, the same care that they did for this show, and they're able to weave it in really cool into what is these some of these cinematic things. Like I feel like when we see the Penguin in the Batman, we're gonna be like, man, we know so much about this guy. That is a really cool added benefit that a lot of people never get in their superhero films. So I think if they can do that with that same film, that same effect, I'm here for it. Yeah, it just it depends on that patience and the timing and not oversaturation, but I think it can be done correctly.
I think that they potentially have a good formula on their hands, and I don't know if they're going to do this or not, but if they were to do something like, okay, you get the Batman, then you get the Penguin, then you get the Batman
Hmm.
Part 2, then you get another series, and then you get the
Hmm.
Batman Part 3, and then you get another
Another
series, and just
series.
sort
I'm
of
down for it.
intersperse it that way. And I like that particular sort of formula because it's quality control. You're not just throwing 12 TV shows at us like, oh yeah, we're just gonna expand out this universe and everybody gets a show. Like, no, don't do that. Take your time and really decide on who needs that fleshing out, who needs that extra
Hmm.
backstory. And perhaps it's a character we've already met, or maybe it's a character that we will meet in the next film that could then be spun off into their own show. And I feel like that they already know that, and I think that they're taking their time. There were already rumors of other shows that they were possibly developing. There was that Gotham PD show at one point. There was an Arkham show that had been floating around at one point, and I think that they kind of killed both of those.
Hmm.
Probably realizing like, we don't really probably have a great story to tell here, so let's just move on. Let's not force it and focus on what we feel like is worth exploring. And hopefully they continue that, and I think that they will. But yeah, if we got like one or two more of these, I'm here for it. In between the movies, I think that that's a great way to continue to build out this world, not give us too much, but obviously tie in all those extra pieces that they're building out with this crime saga that
Hmm.
they're pursuing here. So we'll ultimately have to see. But folks, those are all of our thoughts on the final episode of The Penguin and the entire series of DC and HBO's The Penguin. If you've checked out this brand new edition of the series, definitely hit us up and let us know what you think.